I felt that took a little longer than usual for the recording to start there. It was like
Yeah.
stuck at one, like from the countdown, it was just sticking it at one. Yeah. It's just, it's like, when you're about to go, on stage and, you know, they're saying introducing, and it just pauses there for a minute and you have that moment of panic, because like, is it me? Am I next? Whatever, I don't know. Uh, Maybe it's just me and I've just internalized or externalized all of my fears and lack of self-worth.
I think it was just excitement. I think we were just excited to get into the discussion today. So we are like, the one was taking too long for us to get into the conversation.
I like your interpretation better. I'm going with that. Welcome to Zero to Traction, a podcast about how first-time founders create companies that scale. I am one of your regular co-hosts, JDM, aka Josh David Miller, here with my other regular co-host, Cameron Law. Cameron, how are you this fine new week?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back in the studio as always. And I love seeing that your plants are still alive back there. So kudos to you that they survived the quick getaway. So just
You
wanted
know
to
what? They have survived. What is it now? They've survived a week and a half. Um, so that's not bad.
be proud of you.
Yeah, I'm proud of myself. They're alive. They appear to be healthy and thriving, which is good. Especially since I spent the bulk of last week out of town. So, you know, but what can you do? What can you do? So, but enough about my plants. So we were, we have a limited amount of time to record today, so we will dive like straight into it. Last week, when we were talking, we mentioned it might be a great idea to talk about Q&A. And so we've gathered here to talk for the but you didn't answer my question edition of Zero to Traction. Cameron, kick us off, set us up, and then we got some stuff to go through.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm really looking forward to diving into this topic. I think, one of the things that we often see is, we've talked a lot about how, there's this element of the pitch being kind of a performance, and there's elements of ultimately that you're trying to, have clear communication, but really that's built on this like, do you have strong foundations of your business model, and ultimately is there alignment, all of these things. Well, I think there's another whole element to this whole process is, your engagement with the audience, and could be investors, it could be, in pitch competition, could be with the judges, but how do you handle the Q&A conversation? And oftentimes like that's where, these opportunities are won and lost. That could be you not getting the check for your investment, but also could be, maybe you not walking home as the a winner of the competition. And so we really want you to like dive into this process. And often, this elements of the Q&A is, they're going to identify the gaps in your business model, or ultimately in your presentation. And so we wanted to peel back that layer, one from our conversation of last time of like, maybe what are they actually, hinting at in relation to that conversation of like, here's the question that they're asking, so you can dissect that and actually make decisions and make your company better. But also, how do you be effective in this communication with your audience during the Q&A? And so passing the if we had like a speaker ball for Q&A, I'd pass it over you to JDM to dive in a little bit deeper.
All right, I
We
have
could we
I have
could we
caught.
could toss this. There you go. There
There
you
we
go. You
go.
caught it.
For those not watching this on YouTube, that didn't make any sense. But Cameron and I do have, while we are not together, we have the same fidget toy here, which is a pretty awesome. I forget what they're called.
Bex.
Specs, yes. Which is a pretty cool fidget. That was one of my frivolous thoughts last year, I think, sometime, which is great. Anyway, um, so yeah, so okay, so there's like a couple of different categories of things that I think make sense to talk about because so many founders suck at the Q&A, and we spend a lot of time training founders how to engage in the pitch process itself in a performative way. And we've talked about that. We don't need to rehash that here. But we don't really spend a lot of time talking about Q&A aside from things like make your answers brief, right? Because people drone on for forever, particularly when they lack confidence. But there's a lot more to it than that. And so I have kind of three different categories of things. So the first one is just some general how to engage with the Q&A process just as a person. That's kind of category one, and it's three pairs of things. The second thing is about understanding the question itself. That's a whole topic. I think we touched on that briefly last week on the show. And then the third thing is some specific tactical advice of like there are four question types, and how do you actually go ahead and respond to these four question types in a way that's compelling for any type of audience, but with a little eye toward investors and pitch competitions. So if we just start with the understand the question. I know that was the second one I mentioned. I usually talk about in that order, but let's start with understanding the question. By far, the most important thing is to make sure you understand the question before you answer it. And if you don't, it's okay to ask a follow up. Make sure that you understand the question, because like there's this old sales adage. I know it from like Glengarry Glen Ross, where the Richard Roma character, who's like he's the salesman on top right now, is lecturing a guy who's basically his boss, but he's the office manager. On just sale that the guy just borked for him. And he says, you never open your mouth till you know what the shot is. Are you laughing at my use of borked?
I don't know what that means. You use a lot of big words that I don't know half the time.
Well, in my defense, borked is not a bit B-O-R-K is in bork.
Cool.
Um,
Big
so,
as
okay,
in
so,
like
so bork means to mess up, and I like it for a couple of reasons. So one of the reasons I really like borked is, to me, it's like got a very like Swedish chef quality to it. Bork, 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 bork. And I'm a Muppet fan, so like that works for me. And it's also, onomatopoetically, like it fits. There's your big word. It's like bork. You can kind of like get that it means to mess things up just in context, like bork, borking something. It sounds like it. But the third reason is I'm not 100% sure on this, but you're the etymology guy, so maybe you can help us out here. But I'm pretty sure borking comes from the failed nomination of a Supreme Court justice named Robert Bork that Ronald Reagan had nominated. And I think that you got borked, I think is where that came from. But I'm not 100% sure on that. So there's a lot of reasons to like that. But anyway, bork means to mess it up. But making sure that you understand the question before you answer it is like really important, because if you try to just talk, then you actually don't know what the target is. And so you're just shooting blindly, hoping that you address it. If you don't understand the question, ask some intelligent questions to get to where you understand it, because once you do, you know what the shot is, and you know how to answer that question in a way that is compelling and convincing. So that's like number one, is like understand the question.
Yeah, I think just a quick adage, because it also just shows, as you kind of come back trying to understand it, if you're actually like peeling back what the question is, because maybe there was oftentimes there's many layered questions within the one question. So identifying really maybe what the crux of what they're trying to ask is, will one really come off in a positive way, but also allow you to like pinpoint what the actual like misunderstanding was. And then that will allow you to maybe, answer multiple questions within one core element, because they're trying to piece different pieces together.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. And that goes back to our conversation last week about the kinds of, pitch feedback that you get, right? It's like questions kind of work the same way. It's like, what are they even getting at here? Because what they're asking might not be what they're asking, right? Or a better way to phrase that, maybe what they're asking might not be what they want to know. And so if you ask a question about what they're trying to ask, it can help them serve to clarify what they're trying to ask, which can only work in your favor anyway. So that's the first thing. The next thing is like just what I usually call the pro tips of Q&A. And it's three pairs of words, right? So like the first one is calm and confident, right? So you have to be calm, but you have to be confident. And there's a balance between both of those. Too calm and you can appear blasé, and that doesn't help you. Too confident, you're just an asshole. So like none of those are great. But like if you're calm and confident, like that's just reassuring to people. Makes it seem like you know what you're talking about, right? Another word you could put in there might be comfortable. Like if we wanted another C, it'd be calm, confident, and comfortable, right? Somebody who appears calm and confident does appear to be calm.
And the other C that comes to mind is competent. I think that bridges a lot of those elements, right? Like I think that oftentimes
Totally.
where people, I think, fumble, again, this goes to that hierarchy, but when you're not competent in the core elements of your business model, that's where it comes across that you don't actually have the confidence or clarity, or that you're not calm, because you're kind of making things up as you're answering the question, because you don't have that clear confidence and competence around the business model.
Totally. And we can always tell. I know a lot of founders think they can get away with it, but we can always tell.
So I have a question for you, JDM, kind of on that thread was, I often, you can tell when someone's kind of making something up on the spot. And I think there's, maybe it's aligned with one of your T's, the theory, right? They're building their theory as they're going. But like, what's your thought on kind of like saying that's a, really awesome question. I don't, have a, solid answer for you at this, point. This is kind of how, based on the evidence that I have, and then kind of building it. Like, how would you answer that instead of like, just making something up, like building that solid foundation, which I think would demonstrate your thought process and how you would go achieve it next.
Yeah, I think there's two big ways that I would answer that, but I also want to just acknowledge that, and this is my personal preferences here, and I do know investors who disagree, but for me, I think I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer,
Yeah.
right?
Awesome.
I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, we actually don't know. I don't have any problem with that. I think in certain contexts that can come across wrong, um, which is why I'll give you the two categories. But I think I don't know is a perfectly acceptable answer. I'm a big fan of epistemic humility. Like that's just the case sometimes. Sometimes we don't know. What I will say though, there's two big ways to answer I don't know questions that will usually land well. So one is to say, we don't know, and here's how we're going to find out, right? So that like it's demonstrating a couple things. So one, it's demonstrating that you thought about it and that, like that this is not an unknown that somebody who shouldn't know better than you knows better than you, right? Like so that is
Right.
so it's demonstrating that you've thought about it. The second thing that's interesting there is that like unknowns are where risks are. It's because something is not fully known is where the risk is always. That's just how risk works. And then the degree to which it's unknown is one of two factors that determines how risky it is. The more unknown something is, the more risky it is. Impact is the other one. The more impactful something is, the more risky it is, right? And so what you're demonstrating here is that because you have a path to fill in that knowledge gap, you have therefore a path to make it less risky. So that's one way to do it, but that's not always appropriate. Another way of answering the same thing is to, and again, this is context dependent, is to say, and this honestly, I think this is the like one of the best ways to just phrase it. It's just this one sentence is, we actually don't have a firm answer on yet, but that's figure outable. Right, and just, like, end it there because the point is like, you're demonstrating, A, that you're not worried about it, and again, you need to be right about that, right? If it's something you should be worried about, then this is not the right place to say that, but if it's,
Right.
like, a really detailed question that is just wrong to be, like, really focused on right now, or if it's something that, like, is not reasonable to know now, and it's not something you're just gonna cover, but something to be figuring out, later, that might be, an example of that would be a detail somewhere, precise manufacturing costs, right? Like if you're like, there's a big difference between something costing $10 to manufacture and costing, $500 to manufacture, right? Those are two completely different economies. But if it's something, if it's like, is it, $50 or we're going to be able to get that down to 30, in that world, if the unit economics support that kind of variability, then it's less important. Right? If you can make it work at 50, but it's better at 30, then it doesn't matter. And that's figure outable, right? Economies of scale help you bring down manufacturing costs. That's like just kind of something like that, maybe. Then you can say, yeah, but it's figure outable because you're just demonstrating it's not really, you know, something you're worried about. You're calm, you're confident, and you're also just punting on the question for now. And if they push to say, like, well, blah, 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 to tell you why, then this is where you can, you can either respond by saying, like, here's why we're not worried about that. And that might be by saying, well, it'll work either way. Right. It'd be great if we get this down because that's going to make us even more profitable. But if we don't, this still works. And here's why. Like, you're demonstrating a mastery of unit economics at that point, which is, by the way, one of the best things you can do as a founder of a company is to demonstrate your mastery of unit economics. But I mean, that goes for SaaS too, even though people don't think about it that way or use the term unit economics that much for that. The other way that you could, that you can answer that is not by explaining why it doesn't matter, but to then go, okay, well, now let me explain how we're going to find that out. You kind of fall back on, a path that you didn't want to go down, but they're making you go down. And so don't be obstinate, right? You're going to have to go down that path. So
Yeah. Yeah. The last addition I would have there, and we'll turn it back to you to kind of tackle the next one on your list, but was thinking through like, it's also a great way to follow up with them and continue that dialogue. So using that as like a leverage point to say, hey, I don't have the answer. This is kind of, I see the importance and this is kind of our thought process and theory, but I'm going to go back to, the team to, gain the evidence or whatever that might be. And then that's a great point to follow up or have the update, which one demonstrates that you saw the importance of that risk, but also that you gained the evidence. And so it's like, oh, I see how they're going to take those, questions or advisement going forward, and that could lead into opening those doors.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So to moving on to our next pair, they're also C's, but it's calm, or sorry, it's in addition to calm and confident, we also want to be clear and concise, and those two kind of go together as well. And so this is we don't need to dwell on this, but um, take a moment, take a breath, compose your thought before answering. Don't just start rambling. If you can't pull that off, and most people can't, then just take a moment, figure out what you want to say, a brief pause while you're thinking through an answer so that you can give a calm, confident, concise, and clear answer is way better than starting down a sentence that you don't know how to finish. Right? It's rambling, it's incoherent, it's confusing, and you may never get there, and then you just kind of look like you don't know what you're talking about. So clear and concise. Probably not much more we really need to say about that. And then another one, the
Pretty
last
clear and
one is
concise.
well played, well played, sir. Uh, the next one is honest and humble, so two H's. But in this one, like honesty and humility are, I think, undervalued in in this like Shark Tank like culture. Where uh, we have cults of personality, and that's like a big part of American culture now, is like these cults of personality. Um, and I don't think the real world works that way, right? It's not a Gordon Ramsay, it's not an Elon Musk. It's not like that's not the way the world doesn't work that way usually, right? Like that's abnormal. And so we are like we're entering into long-term relationships, right? When you're pitching for something outside of a pitch competition, it's about long-term relationships, very long terms, years long relationships. And so you want somebody that you want to work with, and we want to work with people who are honest, and we want to work with people who are humble. And one of the biggest differences between somebody who is like raising for their second or third company and somebody who's raising for their first is in that balance between confidence and humility. So a lot of first time founders come out like they're on Shark Tank. They're in sales mode. They're trying to be slick and doing all that. Whereas the guy who's raising his third is just he's pretty calm, he's pretty confident. But she's also saying things like, like, yeah, we actually don't know the answer to that. It's figure outable. That's not something that we're too terribly worried about. Or yeah, we don't have the answer to that. What we're really hoping to figure out through some experimentation is exactly what that value is going to end up looking like, because that's going to lead to this decision. And we don't know. We don't know the answer to that right now. Right? It's like that. That's to me the biggest difference between experienced founders and inexperienced founders.
Love that. I mean, I think the only adage I would have is I think it's I imagine in these pitch competitions, it's easier to go down the path of like that, you know, blurred line of, oh, we're nearly at revenue, but we don't have the dollars, and we're at revenue, right? Just because it looks better, but those things all come out, and if you're not actually going to progress forward, that signals for the next venture that you go or whatever that might be. And so really holding on to that, or if you are demonstrating things, it's going to get uncovered in the diligence process as you actually get to that investment. So there's no point in um, not being honest up front with those things, and also bringing those things up. It demonstrates the relationship that you're going to have with them if they are going to invest with you going forward, right? It's going to allow them to kind of feel like, hey, they're going to let us know when times are challenging, and that we can dig in together to get the company in the right spot for sure. So I
Totally.
love those two as well.
So we're
There
we're
was
running just kind of go ahead.
I just wanted to add one thing. I think just in this whole kind of Q&A portion as well, I also thought that one of the things as you're talking about the like humble and honesty was, hey, I don't have the answer to this, or, I'm looking to gain this evidence. It's also a great time to then, if there is that trusted relationship, to say, but this is how you can support me in maybe getting, a connection to finding out what that answer is, or I'm looking for this type of support. And so having that, um, you know, by being honest, by being clear and concise of the evidence or wherever you're trying to go, it makes that ask a little easier versus it coming out of like nowhere of like, wait, where did this come from? They actually can connect the dot based on the, solid dialogue that you've had.
Totally. So the kind of last thing, and we'll have to do this kind of quickly because we're running short on time, but it's like there are four types of questions that you get in Q&A. And those four types are clarifying questions, challenging questions, strategic questions, and financial questions. Those are basically the four categories. And might be like some blurred lines and some like operational or tactical questions, but they'll usually fall into one of these four categories. So and the way that you go about answering those questions, or how you think about answering those questions, is different based on the category. And so like the first thing you do when we say understand the question is know which one it is. Are they looking for clarification? Are they challenging you? Are they asking a strategic question? Or are they answering a financial question? Right? Those are four completely different kinds of questions. And it's not always super clear. So once you put them into one of those four types of categories, then you can figure out how to approach it. So I'll go through these super fast. The first one is a clarifying question. They just want to understand something, right? That they didn't necessarily understand. And so what your key job here is to be clear. And in order to be clear, you have to understand what they are asking. By far, most important thing is if you think they're asking a clarifying question, if it is not immediately obvious to you what they're after, then make sure you clarify before you actually start. And the best way to do that is to just restate their question as a question, right? So in other words, blank, right? Restate their question to them. And if they go exactly, then you can answer the question confidently because you know what they're asking. If they don't, they're going to clarify. But if you try to clarify something that you don't know what you're clarifying, it isn't going to work, right? So that's that one. You'll get a lot of those questions. They're one of the most common question types. That's probably like 40% of the questions are going to be like these clarifying questions, particularly in the early days where you're still figuring out how to pitch it, right? So that's one. The second one are challenging questions. This is where they're challenging you, right? They're poking holes. They're finding problems. They're asking you what ifs and engaging in that process. To do that, you need to be direct and you need to provide evidence. Right. That's how to answer those things if they're challenging you on it, be direct. And so like, if they're saying something like, why would I buy this? They're actually not asking, why would I buy this? And so the appropriate response is not to tell them why they would buy this because they already told you they wouldn't. And now you're entering down a sales conversation when you should be entering down a fundraising conversation, right? So what you want to do is say, well, you probably wouldn't. Who would is blank. And here's how we know that. Right? Because what you're asking what they are answering what they actually want you to answer, but that they didn't ask directly. And because asking good questions is actually an art form and most people aren't good at it, even people who ask questions for a living. So if they're challenging you, be direct, provide evidence. It's the best way to do it. Third one is strategic. So for strategic questions, you want to demonstrate your thinking. That's what it's entirely about. You don't actually have answers. All you have is theory. Right. So you want to, through answering strategic questions, to demonstrate your thinking about why that's important. So be clear and be concise, but demonstrate that you're thinking about this in a way that is valuable and interesting and unique, because that's how you're actually going to demonstrate value there. The last one is a financial one. And that's just to be really simple and provide evidence, right? So if they're asking a financial question, where's it coming from? Explain it really simply. Don't overcomplicate things. Don't bring in your 5 different ways of making money as part of the revenue model, right? Be super clear about it. Like our average contract value is blank. That's going to lead to blah, 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 blah. And here's how we know that, right? Like, again, be super clear because it's basically a kind of clarifying question. So.
Love it. Those are quick hitting, questions and the way to ultimately answer them for sure. So I have nothing to add there. I love the breakdown. And you could also see how they tie back to all of the other elements of like being clear and concise, humble and honest. And I forget what the first two C's
Yeah,
were.
two different ways, right?
Yeah. So I love that.
Well, that is kind of all the time we have for today, but we can do some really, really quick frivolous thoughts. We'll be super rapid with it. So here's mine. This is a very quick rant about something I don't get that I saw a lot while I was on vacation last week is dudes at the urinals in the bathroom on their cell phones, like scrolling, typing, texting, doing the whole thing. Like, I just don't understand it. Like, I don't understand any situation where that would be necessary, where you either cannot wait the 30 seconds to respond to the message, or you cannot respond to the message and wait 30 seconds to go to the bathroom. Like, I do not understand the situation where both like that can't happen. I just don't get it. It's disgusting. I don't know. Like, I have all kinds of sanitation questions with regard to this, and I have attention span questions. And before anybody goes blaming the youths on this, these are my peers. These are the millennials. Y'all, I don't get ya. Here endeth the rant.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. That's funny. So it sounded like you've seen a lot of this at on your vacation. So those are very
I
public
did, and
spaces at Disneyland for sure.
in the Disneyland bathrooms, a lot of dudes on their phones, and, like, I'll be honest, there were plenty of times when I was going, into the restroom. Most of them don't have doors, right? They just have the maze path,
Right.
in. Like, going in and going out where I'm on my phone, you're looking at, like, wait times for rides and, connecting with family who aren't there or whatever, like, there's all that's a thing, but, like, politics stops at the water's edge, and I think texting should stop at the water's edge too, if you get my drift there.
Yes,
So,
for sure.
that's just yeah.
That's it. I like that. That's a funny one. But well, you teed up with a good one. I don't know how good mine will be. I just finished the first season of Shogun, which is a show on Hulu. So the first time I went to watch it was on a plane ride, and I realized it was predominantly in subtitles because they're speaking Japanese, and then there's a little bit of English here and there. And I was like, I don't have time to read this, and but then I had heard, no, it's a really good show, and came back to it and crushed the first season, and excited about season. They've committed to do 2 and 3, but it just is a really interesting, like, historical drama of kind of, Japan and the samurai. And so I highly recommend checking it. But I didn't give it a fair shot on my first go, but came back to it and really enjoyed it. So highly recommend checking it out.
That, great recommendation. I'm gonna add that to my list. I've heard good things from other people too. Cool. Well, that is all the time we have here. And please remember to like, subscribe wherever you like and subscribe. And podcasts do grow by word of mouth. So if you are enjoying the show, you like this episode, found it insightful, please take a moment, share it with a friend who you think might like it. Let's get help some more founders launch and scale their companies. And with that, we'll call it here. Cameron, thanks so much for joining me again this week in the studio.
Of course, my pleasure. And for those listeners, if you have questions, throw them in the comments, and we'll practice what we are talking about here in the Q&A. So we look forward to seeing your questions in the comments. But I'll see you next time, and speak soon.
Way to tie it all together, man. Cheers.
Cheers. All right.